I'm going to do a little bit of a show and tell and challenge you. Right? Everyone knows that Thornhill and Toronto Jews are North America's intellectual black belts. So to try to keep you awake, I'm going to try to prove that. The subject for this series has been two worlds. And so let's take a look at how we look at a subject which is fundamental to being human, certainly to being Jewish, and how the non-Jewish or the secular, the outside world looks at that. And for that reason, I'm going to quote some sources that are not from our world. I mean, we don't usually do that. We don't need to do that. We have whatever we need in Torah, more or less, as you'll hear from our Bridewitz. But I'd like to begin by looking at something from the non-Jewish world and seeing how we approach the same issue. And the underlying question here, the underlying subject, is really the subject of our moral knowledge. How do we know what's right and wrong? And I'd like to try to show you that there's some surprising elements here. But for this, you're going to have to sit on the edge of your seat and think with me. Yeah, I've seen more enthusiastic expressions than that. All right. But let's try to do this together. So the subject is how we know what's right and wrong, and how we ought to relate to that and develop it and use it in education of ourselves, our children, our students. So here's I think, a scenario that will illustrate this point very well. In 1967, a very interesting British philosopher by the name of Philippa Foot wrote an article about abortion. Philippa Foot was an interesting lady. She was the granddaughter of an American president. Her mother, Sarah, was born in the White House in 1896. Who was the American president in 1896? Do Canadians know American history? They avoid it. Well, in 1896, Grover Cleveland was the American president. And Sarah, his daughter, was born in the White House. She later ended up marrying a very famous British First World War aristocrat. And their daughter, Philippa, grew up in Britain. She grew up at a time when girls were not supposed to be educated. She never went to school, in fact. She was taught at home. Girls were supposed to look good and not think. Well, that's how it was back then. She made it to Oxford, despite that, and she became a well-known moral philosopher. She was really atheistic. Her friend Elizabeth Anscombe was a well-known Roman Catholic philosopher. Their friend Iris Murdoch was part of the group. Interesting times, interesting personalities. But she became a leading thinker in the subject of ethics and morality. And you probably remember... Thanks.
Has to do with audio.
Can you do with that as well? Thanks. If you can make that higher, that would be good. But if you can't, don't worry. 67, you probably remember, was part of the time during which abortion was being very heatedly debated. And she wrote an article about the ethics of abortion. And in the course of that article, she posed an analogy, if you like, or an ethical dilemma that has subsequently become quite famous. And to show you what it is, I'm going to draw you a picture. I don't know if you know that one of my many accomplishments is postmodern art. As you'll soon see. Can you hear me without the mic? Okay, this is a trolley line. And coming down the line, you have a trolley. Okay, here's your trolley coming down the line. You are standing right here. But unfortunately, on the trolley line, there are 5 people tied to the track. How's that? Not bad? Okay. In a few seconds, 5 people will be killed. However, right here is a side track. If you're interested in railroads, this is called a spur. You can pull this lever, which will deflect the train onto the side track, away from the 5 people. Unfortunately, on the side track is 1 person. Do we get the problem? Any questions about the question? Okay, so your problem is you are standing as an innocent bystander. Actually, in Philippa Foot's original piece, she had you as the driver of the trolley. But that's complicated. That complicates things, as I think you'll probably see. And so other thinkers, particularly a lady called Judith Jarvis Thompson, who's a professor at MIT, I think she's Jewish if I'm not mistaken, she's modified the scenario so that you are standing at the side of the track, you're not driving the train, and your dilemma is, do you do nothing and watch 5 people die? Or do you rapidly pull the lever, change the points, direct the train onto the side track, where 1 person will die and 5 will be saved? If you would deflect the train, raise your hand. Okay, you're in very good company. I think probably about 70% of you said you'd raise your hands. In fact, when given time to think about this, about 94 to 95% of Westerners would opt to deflect the train. Culture makes a difference here. Asian people tend to value community over individual more than Americans, who tend to view individual over community. There are cultural differences here. But if you survey Western people, particularly American college-age students, most of them would deflect the train. In fact, if you'd like to research this, there is Harvard University has a website, I think it's called Moral Choices, where they give you many scenarios like this, and they invite you to click on your options, and tens of thousands of people have done that, so you can actually explore the statistics and you can see how people respond. But the vast majority, well over 90% of people, would deflect the train. By the way, this whole field has become a new field of modern philosophy. It's now called trolleyology. Trolleyology. All right. And this is the field that she began. Okay, how about the second? How about this case? Okay, trolley line going under a bridge. Here's your trolley. Coming down the line. 5 people on the track. And there is a fat man standing on the bridge. You're a scrawny, emaciated, skinny individual. Jumping onto the track won't do any good. But if you just push him off the bridge onto the track in the path of the trolley, you will stop the trolley. He'll be killed, but he'll stop the train and 5 people will be saved. If you'd push him off the bridge, raise your hand. Only 2? All right, okay, well, that's interesting. Only 2. You're in good company. Less than 4% of Western people would do that. And here we certainly have much less than that. They would not push him onto the track. And here's the challenge. What's the difference? All I can see as a difference is that here you are bringing a train to a man. And here you're bringing a man to a train. You see that? What you're doing in both cases is killing someone to save 5 people. That's clearly your intention in both cases. Difference only is here you're doing it by bringing the train to the man to kill him, and in this case you're bringing the man to the train to kill him. But in both cases you're using that death to save 5 people. So what's the difference? No. What do you mean there's no difference? 80% of you said you do that. Nobody said they do that. There's clearly a difference. Okay, so I knew you'd say that. I knew you would say that. He said that you have contact with a person here, getting your hands dirty with murder. You said directly. So you notice, if you look carefully, I've set up a lever right there. And this lever is connected to a trapdoor in the bridge. Okay? When you pull the lever, the trapdoor opens and is ever so gently lowered onto the track in the path of the train. No getting your hands dirty, don't have to touch him. Both cases are identical actions. Same distance, same timing. All you do is pull a lever. In this case, the lever sends the train to the man to kill him. In this case, the lever sends the man to the train to kill him. What's the difference? By the way, I don't think direct or indirect makes any moral difference. It might make an emotional difference, but I don't think that's a significant moral factor. What's the difference? Your action is causing this man to die. You have control equally in both cases. Let's not get confused. In both cases, you can do nothing and watch 5 people die or cause 1 person to die. Oh, no, that's cheating. You may not introduce any variables other than what I've given you. Now, just 1 second. Here's a rule in Gemara learning that you must keep all else equal. The lawyers call this ceteris paribus. You can only work with what I've given you. You can't tell me these are your friends, that's your mother-in-law. You can't do that, right? No. All the variables have to stay the same. That's a rule in science. In the lab, we freeze the variables, even though life is not like that. When I studied medicine, they taught me the principles of medicine in glorious black and white clarity. Life is never like that. But we study the principles that way to isolate the principle. And therefore, don't tell me maybe this, maybe that, this is more likely, that's more distant. They're both identical in every respect, except for the,
There is a difference, but I don't know if it's a practical difference. On the first case, all the people are already on track.
So is that one already on a track?
No, he's on top of a bridge.
What's the difference where he is?
Because he's not expecting to be hit by a train.
Oh, I assure you both of these people are not, just let's get this clear. This fellow, just 1 moment. This fellow is on a track that is never used. In fact, this track has never ever been used and never will unless you put the train on it. This fellow never falls off bridges. Okay, you get it? And they're both tied up. And in case you didn't notice, he's fat too. Okay, so we've leveled the playing field. Yeah. I don't want emotional. I want a principal difference of morality. Yes. That's interesting. Your claim is that we respond this way because we've been taught by society to relate to these differently. First of all, where does society teach us these 2 things are different? Killing someone to save 5? Which societal element makes this different for us? The hero. You're a hero in both cases here. You're saving your hero or a villain in both cases. Where's the fireman jumping in to save here? You're not in danger. You're totally out of the situation in both cases. You're not going to get hurt. No, I'm afraid you're not doing too well. Yeah.
So in the first case scenario, the man's death is not for sure, but could be potential.
You're cheating. It's guaranteed. 1 second. I'm guaranteeing his death. I told you. Both cases, variables guaranteed. If he has 100% death possibility, I'm going to give him 100. Don't give me variations in practicality. What's the principal difference? Yeah. What? What's the moral difference between the cases? Pressure? But then why did you raise your hand in the first case? Yeah. The delay is exactly the same. I told you, all the physical factors are identical. 3 seconds till they die in both cases. I don't want practical differences. I want a principal difference. Yes?
In the second example, you're really intending to kill the guy.
That's interesting. I think I'm intending to save 5 people in both cases. But now you say something a bit more interesting. Let me tell you, because you're failing miserably so far, something very interesting. The first point to extract from this exercise is something very interesting. And that is, I asked you for your response. It didn't take you 5 seconds to respond to this, and most of you refused to respond to that. When I ask you why, you don't know. That's very interesting. When I ask you to articulate the difference, if I did a survey as you walked into this room, and I said, why do you hold your moral positions? You would say, I'm an intelligent person, I've worked them out, they're consistent, I'm intellectual. Really? I ask you what to do, you know immediately what to do. And when I ask you to give me the intellectual rationale, you don't know. That is very interesting. That demonstrates that our moral intuition is not intellectual. It's not an articulated process. We did not go through what society teaches us to do. None of you even gave me a religious reason. You should have said to me, well, the Torah says this and that, or there's a principle. You didn't do that. You responded naturally, and this is a very remarkable observation. It means that we have a moral knowledge which is very deep, and even to the extent that we cannot explain it, even when given time and the challenge, we know what to do. That's very interesting. I'm not claiming we're always right. In fact, our moral intuition can be seriously distorted by society and by many other things. But at root, we have a moral sense. Is this authentic from a Jewish point of view? I think it is. I will give you some astounding examples. First of all, we have a statement, Derech Eretz Kadma La Torah. Derech Eretz, which means many things, but one of the things it means is a sense of justice and righteousness and fairness and rectitude. We have that sense, and we ought to have it before you start studying Torah. The simplistic view that you're a blank slate and you come to religion and religion teaches you what's right and wrong is oversimplified. The Torah requires you to come and start studying Torah with a sense of fairness and righteousness. When you study children, you'll see they have an inflamed sense of what is right and fair. You buy him a blue one and her a pink one, that she wants the blue and he wants the pink. You buy them both blue, they want each other's. They have a very inflamed sense of what is right and fair and just, and that is part of our nature. I'll give you a more astounding example, really astounding. The Torah is full of people asserting their moral intuition against God. Against God. I see some puzzled faces. Imagine you walk out here this evening and Hashem, God, taps you on the shoulder, right? I mean, if this happens to you, see me, you need therapy. But imagine, and Hashem says to you, I'd like you to do me a favor. And you say, whatever you say. He says, tomorrow morning I'd like you to find some little kittens and torture them to death. Because I, God, tell you that that's good. What would you respond? You'd say, God, if you say it's good, it must be good. Would you? I don't think so. The Torah is full of people asserting their moral sense against Hashem. Example. Hashem comes to Abraham, and he says to him, I've had enough of stone. The Sodomites are wicked, I'm wiping them out. And Abraham says to God, HaShofet kol haaretz lo ya'aseh mishpat. Shall the judge of all the world not do justice? Abraham is accusing God of injustice. Who are you arguing with? How do you do such a thing? This happens throughout the Torah, and God never pulls moral rank. The correct answer is, Abraham, I'm God. Whatever I say is right by definition. I'm the definition of right. God never does that. He says, let's talk about it, let's negotiate. Abraham didn't pray for stone. He claimed that God was being unjust. On the basis of what? I think it's unjust. This is astounding. By the way, it's very interesting. When Hashem said to Moses, I'm wiping out the Jewish people, they've sinned. Moshe said to Hashem, you'd be immorally breaking a promise. You promised the Jewish people, the entire land of Israel, if you kill us all in the desert, you'd be breaking your promise, that's immoral. Amazing. By the way, the Medrash says that God responded as follows. He said, no, I won't break my promise. I'll kill the Jewish people, I'll preserve you. I'll reconstitute the Jewish people from you, and I'll give that nation the land of Israel. Without a moment's hesitation, Moshe turned to Hashem and he said, that won't solve the problem. Because you promised the entire land to the entire Jewish people, that means all the 12 tribes. If you reconstitute the Jewish people out of me, I'm only the tribe of Levi. You wouldn't be keeping your promise to give the land to the whole Jewish people. And the Medrash says that God was unable to answer. That's the kind of attorney you want working for you. By the way, a year and 2 months later, the same conversation recurred, and Moshe Rabbeinu did not use the same card that he held in his hand. He had a trump card in his hand, a winning hand. The spies came back on their fateful mission. They gave a bad report, and Hashem said to Moshe, I'm killing the Jewish people. And here Moses turned to God and he said to him, Hashem, people would say that you're not strong enough to take us into Israel. They say you are mighty enough to conquer the Egyptians, but you cannot conquer Israel, and you're not strong enough, and people will discredit your strength, and that's wrong, don't do it. And Hashem said, well, it's not as good an argument, but okay. And the question is, why didn't he use the winning hand that he had before? And the answer is clear. What was his winning argument? You promised us the whole land of Israel. He can't say that now when the spies have just rejected the land of Israel. Representing all 12 tribes, they've just rejected the land. You can't offer that as an argument. What a chutzpah. So he couldn't say that. So he said, people would say you're not mighty enough. But the Torah is full. The book of Job is full of this. The Torah is full of human beings arguing against Hashem on the basis of their own moral sense. This is amazing. The Medrash says Avraham Avinu, Abraham learned Torah from himself. He came to it. The Rambam says that man was created to know good and evil from himself. You're supposed to know what's right and wrong. Yes, it can get badly distorted, and you need Torah, no question about that. But you ought to have, children need to be taught that they have a sense of righteousness, and that needs to be developed. You don't tell a person you're a blank slate, forget everything you know is wrong, here are the rules, become a robot and observe the rules. It's not right. By the way, mankind, here's an even more astounding fact. Do you know that throughout the history of humankind, West, East, ancient, modern, sophisticated, primitive, all human societies have always agreed on every single moral principle? Isn't that amazing? In every single human society, you may not kill. I'm talking about single moral principles, not for other reasons. Killing for no reason, wrong. Stealing, there's no society where you can steal. There are no amoral societies. Go to Papua New Guinea and steal the breakfast of the savage next to you. Steal his lady. He'll kill you. Not keeping a promise to somebody who's relying on you, betraying them and letting them down when they're relying on you, is immoral. Not showing gratitude to somebody who saved your life is immoral. There's no argument about this. The evolutionists have a very hard time trying to figure out, how did all human beings evolve exactly the same moral ideology? We know the reason we have it because we created B'Tselem. We are a divine projection. We have the same values that he does. We know what's right and wrong. By the way, be careful about this. When moral values conflict, there's no agreement. I'm talking about single moral principles. Can you steal for no reason because you feel like it? Nobody says you can. Can you steal to save a life? Can you hurt one person to save many? Can you kill one to save many? Can you harm animals for humans? No agreement at all. A classic example. Can you torture one person? Let me ask you your opinion. Can you torture someone? Let's say there's a terrorist who's planted a bomb someplace, 50,000 people about to die. If you torture him unbearably, you'll find out where the bomb is. Raise your hand if you think we should torture him. Okay, put your hands down. Raise your hand if you think it's not right to torture such a person. Very interesting. Very interesting. I think current modern American opinion is we ought not to have such things. We ought not. Alan Dershowitz wrote a book a few years ago arguing that it would be moral to torture a person like that. I think current opinion is that it would be wrong. Here's an example. 15 years ago in Germany, listen to this astounding example. In Frankfurt 15 years ago, a wealthy industrialist had a 10-year-old son being tutored by a 24-year-old university student. This is not a Jewish family. The child was kidnapped and a ransom demand was received. The chief of police in Frankfurt realized that the student was probably the culprit and he arrested him. The student refused to disclose what he'd done with the child. The chief of police threatened to torture him. He told him that he had people on his police force who could inflict unbearable pain on him that would leave no marks on his body. Under threat of torture, he broke down and admitted that he'd killed the child, and he told them where he was. They'd found the body of the child in a hut on a lake, and he was convicted. After the trial, the chief of police was tried and convicted for using threat of torture. I think he was given a 2-year suspended sentence in Germany. So the question about whether you can do one thing for others, there's no human agreement. The moralists, the ethicists say ethics has not yet had its Newton. We don't have an organizing principle. But one value in isolation, no disagreement. Okay, let me tell you one or two solutions to this question because you didn't do well at all. I will tell you first of all a non-Jewish solution which is widely used, and then I will tell you what the Chazon Ish, the great rabbi, said about this case. Philip Afuta self-suggested we use the principle of double effect. The doctrine of double effect. This principle says, and this is widely used in medicine, I see doctors here tonight. In modern medical ethics, we use this principle. The principle roughly says if you have one action that has two effects, for example, I have a desperately ill patient who is suffering terribly. I wish to give him a medication that will relieve his pain, but it might stop him breathing. And we got a double effect. The same medicine, by the way, all medicines have two effects. The Ramban says, who is a doctor himself, he says, what heals some kills others. And every doctor knows that even the simplest intervention can have disastrous side effects. But we say it's moral, because you are looking for the first effect, the pain relief, not the second effect, which is the death. You hear this? So two effects under certain very tightly controlled conditions, you can do something that has a double effect. But to do something with double effect, you need the following conditions. Listen well. To do something like kill someone under the title of dodal effect, you need 4 criteria. 1, the act you are doing must not be evil. The act you are doing, the immediate act, must be neutral or good. 2, the death that will occur, the disastrous effect that will occur, must be something that you do not want. It's just an unfortunately foreseen effect, but you don't want it, not as a means nor as an end. 3, there must be no other way out of this dilemma. And 4, the calculation must be worthwhile. 5 against 1. Nobody would do this for 5 against 5. Let's apply the principle. You deflect a train from one track to another. Is that a bad act or a neutral act? Neutral. Anybody tell me that it's a negative act, a bad act? Any offers? Negative. Why? Because there's a man on the track. Okay, I would concede that point. I think this point is arguable. I'm glad that you all responded, most of you, that it's a neutral act. Most philosophers who deal with this say that our version of the train is not evil. But I think you could argue that point. But let's go to the second point. The death of the man on the side track. The train hitting this man and killing him. Is it something you want? Not at all. You do not want it as a means or an end. Let's look at this case. Is pushing a man off a bridge onto a track in front of a train neutral or evil? Bad act. Secondly, do you want the train to hit him and kill him? Absolutely, you need it. That's what's going to save the 5 people. Do you see that? In this case, you don't want the train to hit the man. It's just a side effect. In this case, you need the train to hit the man. That's what stops the train. Do you see that? I see some dubious faces. I will prove it to you. I will prove to you that in this case, you do not want the train to hit this man at all. And in this case, you very much want the train to hit the man. Ready? Imagine you deflect the train, but just before it gets to this man, he jumps up and runs away. Would you be happy? You'd be thrilled. In this case, you push him onto the track. Just before the train hits him, he runs away. Would you be happy? You'd be devastated. 5 people going to die. Right? Do you see that point? Okay. So why didn't you say so? So this is a very clear distinction. I don't think this is Jewishly correct, and I'll try to show you. But it is a very cogent intellectual distinction between the cases. Let me tell you what the Chazon Ish said about this case. Chazon Ish, the great rabbi, head of Torah jury, died in 1954. He was faced with exactly the same question. What happened was there was a person driving his car down the Carmel mountain in Haifa. Have you been there? Very steep mountain. This was a car, actually I think it was a truck, was coming down the mountain and the brakes failed. Actually this was an Israeli car. The brakes had never been used before. They just used the horn, Anyway, he was coming down the mountain, his brakes failed, and he found himself careening towards a bus stop in which 10 people were standing. Okay? Out of control, not his fault. He checked the car, perfectly responsible, doing everything he ought to, but he had no brakes. The car was about to run down 10 people. He could turn, but unfortunately only to a place where 1 person was standing. Very similar to this, except he was the driver. Okay, which is why I told you it gets a little bit more difficult. But that was the scenario. I don't know what the man did, but they asked the Chazon Ish afterwards, Rabbi, what should he have done? And the Chazon Ish said, I think he should have turned and killed the bystander. And if you'd like to look this up, he writes this in his Chosh and Mishpat, Sanhedrin Chaf Hei, as a lengthy analysis, which is remarkable to go through. And he comes to the conclusion that the person, he says, I think, he doesn't come to a firm conclusion, I think he should turn the car and kill the person on the side. People challenged the Chazon Ish. They said, Rabbi, that disagrees with the Rambam. The Rambam says that you may not kill 1 person to save many. So how come you can kill the bystander to save many? The Rambam writes that, in fact, he brings the Gemara that says that when we are, let's say, surrounded by terrorists, and they say, give us 1 Jew to kill or we'll kill everyone, or 1 woman to molest or we'll molest them all, but let's stay with murder. And unfortunately, this has happened many times in Jewish history during the war. This was a constant. Give us 1 Jew to kill or we'll kill you all. The logic is, of course you should give 1. If you don't give 1, everybody's going to die, including the 1 you would have given. The Rambam brings, and there's no argument about this in Jewish law, we cannot kill 1 person to save many. Many of our commentaries say the reason is because we cannot make the choice. Who are we to say it should be you or you or you? So we say, Hashem, it's your problem. Even if we all die, we may not kill anyone. What's not so clear, of course, is if they name the person they want. We want Finkelmovich. He's our problem. This is different. Why? We're not making the choice. Finkelmovich is a dead man. Why should we all die as well? Here there's an argument in the Jerusalem Talmud. I don't want to keep you late. I'll just tell you very briefly. The Yerushalmi, in the 8th parak of Trumas, discusses this question. The Gemara says, well, we can learn this from the historical case of Sheva ben Bichri. Sheva ben Bichri was a man who attacked King David. What's the Jewish punishment for attacking the king? Immediate death. He managed to escape and he hid in the town of Avel. David's army, led by Yoav the general, surrounded the town, and Yoav gave the townspeople that ultimatum. He said to them, if you don't give me Sheva ben Bichri, I'll kill you all. And what happened was a very old woman called Serach bas Asher climbed up on the ramparts and she began debating the case. With Yoav, she prevailed on the townspeople to kill him. They threw his head over the wall. She saved the whole city. The Talmud says you see from this case that you could kill one person to save many if he's named. That's called Yichduhu. Sheva ben Bichri was named, stipulated, specified, and because he was named, they were able to kill him. What's obviously wrong with this proof? What's the problem with this proof? He was guilty. He deserved to be killed. So the Talmud debates that point. Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. One opinion is they killed him because he was designated. The second opinion is they killed him because he was designated and guilty. The first opinion says no, they killed him because he was designated. He just happened to be guilty too. But it's not needed. The second opinion says, how can you prove from this case? He was guilty. The answer is because we learnt in the Bavli that the reason you cannot kill someone is because you cannot make the choice. But here the choice has been made. You could kill him. Do you see the debate? We rule like the Rambam, who rules that you may not kill the person unless he's named and guilty. But it's an unresolved issue. But let's take the basic law. The basic law is you cannot kill one person. Can you volunteer? Can you give yourself to be killed to save a community? Yes, you can. The Talmud has an amazing case. When the Romans occupied Israel, a Roman girl was found killed. The Roman governor accused the Jewish community of Lud, of having killed her. He said, unless you give me the culprits, I'll kill you all. And two Jewish brothers, innocent brothers called Pappus and Lulianus, they went to the Roman and they said, we killed her. And he killed them and they saved the whole city. The Talmud says they're guaranteed a place in the world to come. Some opinions are that the Roman knew they were lying, but he'd made his offer, and so he killed them. Yes, you could give your life to save many. I'm not talking about wartime. Do you remember the young Israeli sergeant who lay down on a hand grenade recently to save his people he was responsible for? That is correct, and wartime also has different rules. But the bottom line is you cannot give a person to save many people. So they said, Rabbi, why do you say that the man should divert his car and kill this bystander to save the people in front of you? The Rambam says you cannot kill one to save many. Do you see the problem? Let me say it very clearly. These are two parallel situations. Number one, my car's heading towards 10 people. If I do nothing, 10 people die. Said the rabbi, turn and kill an innocent person on the side. Number two, 10 people in front of me, terrorists about to kill them. If I do nothing, 10 people die. They give me a gun. Tats, take this gun. Shoot that innocent bystander on the side. Kill him. We save 10 people. May I do that? No way. What's the difference between a car and a gun? See the problem? One's what? Excuse me. In both cases, they're totally in my control. In both cases, I do nothing, 10 people die, or I murder one on the side. Exactly the same. The car's out of control. I do nothing with the car. Yes. You're doing exactly what I told you you're not allowed to do. Yes. 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 Let me rephrase the case for you. Let me rephrase the case. My car's going towards 10 people who are guaranteed to die. That's the case. I turn the car to the side. I'm guaranteed to run down the individual. Hey, I'm making up the cases, not you. That's the case. Terrorists, they're guaranteed to kill. I want the principle here, not the practical difference. Do you get it? Okay. In those circumstances, no variables and maybes. What's the difference in principle? Again, in learning, we're looking for... I'm running him down with my car deliberately. Or I'm shooting him with a gun deliberately. What? They give me a gun. They say, Tats, shoot that guy in the head. And we save 10 people. Said the Chazon Ish, no. Run him down with your car and kill him. Again, let's be clear. If I do nothing, 10 people die through no action of mine. Either the car kills him or the terrorists kill him. I turn to the side and kill one deliberately with a car or a gun. It's exactly the same. Listen to what the Chazon Ish said, yes. Again, I told you, the variables are guaranteed. You can't cheat like that. The terrorists are guaranteed to kill 10. The car's guaranteed to kill 10. I turn to the side, I'm guaranteed to kill one. I don't want practical differences. I want a principle. But I just told you, I've guaranteed. Yeah, you are being very difficult. Yeah. Oh, maybe. Let me tell you what he said, the Chazon Ish. Listen well. Chazon Ish said, when you turn to the side with a gun and kill somebody, that's an act of murder. Would you agree? The Torah does not allow murder for good reasons. When you turn your car away from people in the street, that's an act of saving people. Let me tell you his language. They give you a gun and say, shoot that individual on the side. He says it's a maaseh achsari shel retzicha, a cruel act of murder. You're driving your car towards 10 people and you turn away. Ze maaseh hatzalah. It's an act of saving. For that reason, says the Chazon Ish, I'm not sure. He says this. Listen what he says. When I turn my car away from 10 people in the street, because it's towards one person, which is an act of death, I remain unsure. But it's very different from an act of murder. Let me make you a little bit happier. I'll make it even clearer for you. 10 people in front of me. Even clearer. 10 people in the street, no one else around. Just before I get to them, I can turn aside. Should I turn? Of course. Okay. 10 people in front of me. If I turn as hard as I can, I just hit one of them. Should I turn? Okay. 10 people in front of me. If I turn hard, I miss them all, but hit one on the side. Should I do that? Why not? Okay. However, I'm a doctor in a hospital. I have 5 people in organ failure. They badly need transplants. And they're about to die. The nurse walks in and she says, Doctor, there's a young man in the waiting room. He's come to see his mother. Let's grab him, cut his throat, take 5 organs, save 5 lives. Raise your hand. Well, we're killing one to save many. Says the Chazon Ish, an act of murder in order to save people the Torah doesn't allow. That's what the Rambam's talking about. But an act of salvation, which is what you ought to be doing, even if it kills one, is possibly acceptable. Okay. Does this principle of the Chazon Ish agree with double effect? I don't think so. And if you'd like a black belt question, but for this you have to sit on the edge of your seat and think, I will show you a case that I think distinguishes them in practice. Ready? What would happen if the track looked like this? Get it? Can you see down there? Can't you see? The track backs up. Okay, the track, you'll have to move. Come maybe walk back there where you can see. If the track loops back here, let me ask you, according to double effect, could you turn the train? What does double effect say? You don't want the person to be hit at all. Under these circumstances, could you divert the train? Why? You need him to be hit because this guy's going to stop the train. If he jumps up, the train will back up and kill the 5 people. You see that? If this is the case, I think double effect would clearly say you may not do it. The Chazon Ish, I think, might say you could. Because this, I think, is still an act of diversion from the 5 people. Okay, I wouldn't be stubborn about that. I might be wrong. But I think that might just be a difference between them. Anyway, these are some fascinating scenarios. I've already taken more time than I should. You have a question? What about that?
The waiting room.
Yes. 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 What do you think? According to which principle? Again, double effect, certainly not, because it's an evil act that you want to death. According to the Chazon Ish, you can't do an act of murder to save people? Definitely. Oh, I see. Forcibly take one. That's an interesting question. That is an interesting question. But that attack on a person, okay, that is certainly an evil act. And again, you're attacking his body and injuring him, which is clearly an evil act, and you clearly want that damage. It's not a death. That's true. And you're doing it to save a life. That's true. No thinkers agree that you could do that. Okay? Certainly not the Chazon Ish. And halachically, you certainly cannot do that. It's even debatable about whether you may steal to save a life in Jewish law. Know that? Very interesting. Let me leave you with one thought. One thought. There are other systems that have been used to resolve these issues, and for lack of time, I'll just mention one, and that is known as utilitarianism. This theory says that all this logic, fancy logic, is completely wrong. Just look at the numbers. The principle says the greatest good for the greatest number. 5 against 1, kill him! And according to your question, no doubt about it, grab the person, take his kidneys, because you're saving, especially if you could save 2 people with 1 death. And there are many thinkers, 2 kidneys, kill 1. Utilitarians might even say that you could frame an innocent person and kill him if it will stop more deaths in society as an example, which is heinous, but it's 1 against many. This is serious to be considered. This has never become an acceptable theory. Let me just share with you one insight and I'll finish with this. Sorry? Communist society, I don't think they say you could kill 1 for many. I don't know about that. But anyway, utilitarianism was authored by a couple of famous figures. One of them, by the way, was a man called Jeremy Bentham, who lived more than 100 years ago in England. And if you'd like to visit him, you can visit him. Jeremy Bentham's body is preserved in a glass case at University College London. You know, the English are a little eccentric. And he left instructions in his will before he died that he wants to be preserved in a glass case and wheeled out to every Senate meeting of the university. And there he is. When I go lecture to the medical students, I visit him, I pay my respects. His preserved body sits in a glass case at the entrance hall to UCL. His head is wax, and the real head is in a box on the side, which is locked up because the King's College students used to steal it. So the head is on the side. They bring the head to every Senate meeting, they put it on the table, and he's registered as present but not voting. But now, I'm not kidding you. You probably think I am, but I'm not kidding you. By the way, before I moved to England, I knew that Bentham was there. Why? Because in a famous book of responsa of one of the Dayanim of the London Beis Din, Dayan Grossness, he was sent a question by a young student some years ago who said, I study at UCL and I'm a Cohen. Can I walk through that room? I'm a Cohen. There's a dead body in the room. And the Dayan answers him very interesting. He says, you may not have contact with a dead body, Jewish or non-Jewish, but to be in an oil, a space with a body, that has to be a Jewish body to prevent your being there. There's no problem with this. However, on second thoughts, this may be Bentham's grave. And a Kohen may have no contact with the grave. This is his grave. He's permanently interred here. Walk around if you can. Anyway, amazing thing. Bentham said that you should look only at the numbers. This is a brilliantly simple system, and it has never been accepted. And the reason is, according to most theorists, because it does not feel right. Even though the logic is 1 against many, we just know it's wrong. I'll give you an example given by Professor Williams at Cambridge. He says this: imagine you're backpacking in South America and you stumble into a little village high in the Peruvian Andes. And as you stumble into the village square, you see 20 men lined up against the wall about to be shot. But just before they shoot them, they notice you. Hey, welcome, Americano, whatever you are, visitor, bring you in. They say, in honor of Il Presidente's birthday, we're going to give you a gun, shoot one of these men, and you save 19 lives. And they stand there singing in Spanish and throwing their sombreros in the air and waiting for you to shoot one of them. Raise your hand if you'd shoot one. You would, wouldn't you? No, you wouldn't. Nobody? You're saving 19 people. We just feel that it's wrong. And therefore, feel or know that it's wrong. And therefore, this is a reason why utilitarianism, although it's perfectly logical, has never been accepted. The bottom line take-home message is, I leave you with, we are not blank slates robotically operating according to rules. We are human beings with a deep sense of what's right, and we need to develop that. Torah is meant to correct that, align it, and develop it. By the way, I promise you I'll finish with this. This is becoming an everyday reality. I was driven last week on Friday from Passaic to New York in a self-driving car. My host took his hands off the wheel and his feet off the pedals, and the car drove itself. Now, the problem with these cars is they've been programmed to make choices. If your car's driving along the edge of a cliff and a child runs out into the street, or 10 people appear on the road, the computer programmers have told the car what to do. Kill 10 people or drive off the cliff and kill you. Those are built into the programs. Not only that, they know that if they program the car to kill you, people won't buy them. So these are now, there are halachic responses being written about this, and there's been a consensus of what we ought to do. By the way, the agreement is very interesting. The agreement is we know cars like this will kill people. It's already happened. We know people will die. We'll accept it willingly. You know why? Because much fewer people will die than due to human error. Society will save thousands of lives by cars that kill people very seldom, and therefore it's worthwhile. But how you program the cars, not being agreed. I promise you I'll finish with this. One example is this. Here in London, I live in England now, 1944 in London, imagine a map of London. V-bombs were raining in, the V2 bombs were coming in from France, tens of thousands of people died. Is that to remind me to finish? Yeah, okay, one more minute. The bombs were aimed at Westminster, in the center of London, heavily populated, but the Germans' aim was not good. They didn't have GPS and satellites, and the bombs were falling mainly in Croydon. Southwest London, lightly populated area, and that's where the bombs were falling, the rockets. The Germans desperately needed to know where their rockets were falling, and so they had two secret agents in London, radioing them information about where the rockets were falling. One was called Garbo, one was called Zigzag. Fascinating history, so I'm not going to go into now. These two men were radioing the Germans where the bombs were falling. Unknown to the Germans, they were British agents. They belonged to an operation called Double Cross, and they were telling the Germans where the bombs were falling. Churchill instructed them to tell the Germans that the aim was accurate. Churchill very much wanted to be sure that the rockets would fall in Croydon, where much fewer people lived, and avoid Westminster. One of the members on Churchill's cabinet, I think his name was Harris, he was a working class man who worked himself up, he accused Churchill of murdering people in Croydon. You understand? And Churchill said, I'm saving people in Westminster. This is an application of our principle. Do you know how the argument was settled? There was another cabinet minister who argued forcibly and swayed the decision in favor of the rockets falling in Croydon. He argued it was correct to do that, and his own parents lived in Croydon. And when they said to him, how can you do that? He said, Mum and Dad would have wanted it that way. Okay. Anyway, this happens all the time. When the Americans killed 74,000 people in Nagasaki, Hiroshima, they said, we're not killing civilians, we're saving many more from an atrocious war. Anyway, I leave you with this thought. These are everyday issues. We have a deep sense, deep knowledge of what to do here. And the aim of Torah here is not to squash your innate sense of spirituality, but to develop it and bring it to its perfection. Thank you.